Hello, I'm Eileen Roche, founder of Designs and Machine Embroidery, and I'm thrilled to be back. I've been off for a while, and I'm just thrilled to be back. I had some health issues, but all is fine now, and I am so grateful to my good friend Deborah Jones and Ashley Jones, who covered for me while I was out. I think they did a fabulous job. I was able to watch some of them, after the broadcast. And they did a really great job. I'm sure you would agree. So will you pipe in and tell me where you're watching from? We love to know where you're all watching from. That kind of builds the community and lets us know where everybody is. Hi, Retha. Nice to have you here from Wyoming. I hope your weather is beautiful up there today. And Diane, you're in Massachusetts. I'll bet you just had a whole lot of rain. In Connecticut, Linda, Marianne, both from Connecticut. How about that? And Sharon Crean from upstate New York. Oh, it's great to have everybody here. Hi, Sue Brown from Ontario, Canada. Nice to see you. And Reen Wilcoxon, thanks for piping in. It is good to be back. It's nice to see everybody here. Today, we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is quilting with your embroidery machine. Boy, that technique, I did that on Sewing with Nancy in 2016. And since then, it has just blown up. Everybody wants to do it because we all have quilt tops maybe in our sewing room that need to get finished. So it's really great to be able to get them done on our embroidery machine. So I'm going to share my 5 top tips, and they are, first off, you're going to select your embroidery design. Hi, Beverly, Blakely. I am glad to be back, too. Thank you so much for commenting. Yep. Oh, and Retha, you say perfect timing. Your son is here, and we're making a quilt for him. And you might use this method to quilt his quilt. Oh, I hope you do. I hope you do. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so you're going to select your embroidery design. That's the first tip. Number 2, you want to match your thread weights. Number 3, is using placement tools to make sure that you get that precision placement that you're hoping to achieve. 4 is streamline hooping, because on a quilt, and I have a quilt over there that we're going to take a look at later on, and it's a queen size quilt, and there's over 60 hoopings on that quilt. So you have to learn how to streamline that process or you'll never get the job done. And it's all about getting it done. And then the 5th challenge that we all have, or my 5th tip, is how to handle that bulk on your quilt. But before we really dive into the quilting with your embroidery machine, I just want to take a moment to call out a wonderful thing that's happened in Wisconsin recently. Nancy Zeman has been inducted into the Wisconsin Broadcasters Hall of Fame, and it's a true honor for Nancy, and her family, actually Nancy's family. And if you're not familiar with Nancy, she invented herself, and she invented the how-to in our industry. She was a pioneer and started broadcasting how to do millions of different sewing steps, and eventually got picked up by PBS, and many of you know her. And if you're new to embroidery and sewing and don't know her, well, I encourage you to Google Nancy Zeman and find her on Wisconsin Public Television. You can still watch all of the Sewing with Nancy shows, which is a wonderful thing. So Nancy was truly a trailblazer, but she didn't do it all alone. In fact, she had a team of people at Wisconsin Public Television and also her crew at Nancy's Notions. She was the founder of Nancy's Notions. And in 1989, she hired Deanna Springer. And Deanna Springer started her career with sewing there at that time. So she started as a sewing advisor, literally answering the phone and teaching people how to sew over the phone. Goodness gracious, Nancy's Notions would get a lot of calls like that, even till, past recently. In 1999, Deanna was named Nancy Zeman's executive administrative assistant at Nancy's Notions. And then in 2008, together, they started Nancy Zeman's Productions. Now, that occurred after the sale of Nancy's Notions. So talk about trailblazing, Deanna and Nancy started up again, Nancy's Even Productions, and they continue to create dozens and dozens of Sewing with Nancy episodes. And they also created the Great Wisconsin Quilt Show in conjunction with Wisconsin Public Television. So I would encourage you to watch that short video. I'm going to back up just a moment so you can see the address. It's a 6-minute video, and it talks about Nancy's career and her induction into the Wisconsin Broadcasting Hall of Fame. But I know that Nancy would have been absolutely tickled to receive this when she was alive. And she would also be tickled to know that she was inducted at the same time as Wayne Larrivee, who is the voice of the Green Bay Packers. And many of you may not know that, but Nancy was a big Packers fan, and so am I. And we used to text each other during the games and kind of keep up with what was happening on the field. So anyway, that I just wanted to share that, and I hope that you'll go and watch that. And in fact, the Wisconsin Quilt Show is coming up next week, which is virtual this year. So you can catch that. Anyway, let's get back to quilting. So the number one thing we're going to talk about, well, we're going to talk about 5 different tips. And the first is selecting your designs. Now, when you select your designs, you have to keep several things in mind. And that is, how is the quilt going to be used? So if this is a quilt that you're making for a baby and you really hope it's going to be used and loved by that child, you have to keep that in mind. You probably don't want to go to a tremendous amount of effort quilting that quilt. This is going to be a much loved, much used, often laundered quilt. Now, what if it's a quilt that has precision piecing and you really want to accent blocks? Then maybe you would select quilting designs that fit those specific shapes and accent that patchwork. You would also want to consider is what types of fabrics are used? Well, not types, but are they solids or prints? Because if it's printed fabric, you really aren't going to see the quilting. You know, so print fabrics kind of dissolve all of your quilting. They hide the quilting, as where solids really allow cellular quilting to shine. That's where you see often, if you're at a quilt show and you look at that beautiful quilting in the negative space of a quilt, stop a moment and you'll notice that that area of the quilt, that negative space, is a solid. And that's where, you know, the heart and soul is poured into all those quilting stitches. And is there a theme? If there's a theme on the quilt, then you would probably want to select an embroidery design that mimics that, that theme. If it's a nautical quilt, maybe you add a nautical design to it. If it's a baby quilt, and maybe you digitize or get purchase an embroidery design that has a baby bottle or a rattle, something like that. Christmas quilts most certainly would be holly leaves and, you know, bells, that kind of thing. So it's worth your while to take some time to decide what you're going to place on that quilt. Like on this New York Beauty, well, no, we call this Fit for a Queen, this quilt. You'll notice that each star is, the leg of each star is accented with feathers. That solid white area has 2 different designs in it. And all of it really is very visible because those fabrics are solids. Here is another good example of prints and solids. So on that black and white quilt, you notice in the large black block that is bordered by the solid red fabric, you can really see those quilt designs. They completely jump out at you. Now, on the area on that quilt that is a black and white print fabric, gee, we're not really sure what the quilting design is. I mean, I think it's bubbles, but I'm not really sure because it blends so well with the print. It's not really visible. And another good example on the right is all of those quilting designs on those solid patches really do pop off the quilt. You can easily see that there's some lattice work, there's some feather work, and then just some like ribbon candy in those half square triangles. So take some time to analyze your quilt and then select the quilts accordingly. Now, matching your thread weights. So this is in the needle and the bobbin. You don't necessarily have to match the top thread to the bobbin and use the exact same thread. Now here in this sample, I have our medley thread and I do have a bobbin wound with that. But on my on this quilt, if I'm doing a Christmas quilt that's red on the top and has a green backing, there's absolutely no harm in using red in the needle and green in the bobbin case. And that's because you just want the same weight. So this is 40 weight embroidery thread, and that's what I use to quilt my quilts. So I have the same weight, different colors, wound on a bobbin. Okay, so story time with Cece. Once she says, please talk about thread, quilting thread in bobbin and on top. Well, like I just said, Cece, I like to match those weights. Now, not everybody will agree with you with that statement. I can tell you that. Now, this is on an embroidery machine. So you have to remember when you are embroidering, your machine is set up to pull the top thread to the back when the top thread is paired with an embroidery bobbin weight thread. That's usually 60 or 65, even lighter weight thread on the bobbin. And it's desirable in an embroidery design to pull that top thread to the back because you don't want any bobbin thread visible on the top of an embroidery design. But when you're quilting, you are really just laying down running stitches, just traditional running stitches, although your embroidery machine thinks you are embroidering. So you can mess with the tension settings depending on your machine. I often use a Baby Lock or Brother machine, and I just let the machine use the default settings, and it wants to pull that top thread to the back. But if I have same weight thread, 40 weight top and bobbin, then I get a balanced stitch. And that's what you're going for, is a balanced stitch. You don't want to see the bobbin thread on the top or the needle thread on the back. If you are new to this task and you're a little worried about it, use the same thread color in the same weight in the needle and the bobbin, and nobody will ever know if your needle thread is showing on the back or your bobbin thread is showing on the top. So make it easy. Make it easy. This is not, oh, my patch is falling down. I just kind of glued it on. Sorry. Okay. Use placement tools. Why placement tools? Well, some machines have really high-end features like projectors and cameras, lasers, all kinds of stuff. But I can tell you that using placement tools is fast. No matter what features you have on your machine, it is the fastest way to quilt with your machine because you don't have to wait for the machine to go through its steps to engage. I'm just going to take this off. Oh, I guess it's okay. To engage, go through the steps that it needs to go through to use those high-end features. So I love my Center It kit, which is 5 different shapes: square, circle, hexagon, and 2 different diamonds, 45 degrees and 60 degrees. And they come in, you get 3 in a pack, and they're 12 inches, and they're translucent and flexible, so they are great for placement right under the needle. And I've already done a Facebook Live on that, so you could do a little research on that, and go back and view a video in July that we introduced the Center It kit. Now, the print and stick target paper is ideal for printing a template of your embroidery design. And you're going to, when you print it on the print and stick target paper, you're going to love how it is not only translucent, but it's also adhesive. And it's a fairly low tack adhesive, so it will stick to your quilt and allow you to reposition the quilt and center the needle over the crosshair on the printed template that you printed on your inkjet or laser printer. And then you'll remove that template once you're satisfied with the placement, and then you will get to reuse it dozens and dozens of times. In fact, on this quilt that I'm going to show you over on the other side. I use 2 quilts. I use 2 templates to finish this whole queen size quilt. So it's very cool. Okay, so what's next? What's next is streamline the hooping. Now, you know what I'm going to tell you to do, and that's to use a magnetic hoop, because a magnetic hoop is the only type of hoop that allows you to leave the bottom frame on the machine while you lift the top frame, advance the quilt, and drop that top frame in place. Because when you're going to do that 30, 40, 50, maybe more times, you don't want to have to take that whole hoop, top, bottom, and quilt off the machine, reposition the quilt in the hoop. Oh, no way. You would never. You'd be on to just make table runners. You'd be happy with that. Okay, so now let's talk about streamlining, really streamlining the hoopings. So when you look at your quilt, you're going to divide it into 4 quarters. And we're going to work, opposite how we normally work here in English, where we read on the left to right. We're going to start on the right side, because that's closest to the head of the machine. And then divide your quilt not only in half, but in half again. So you have 4 quadrants. And your first hooping is probably going to be in the center. And it doesn't really, matter if you start like dead center, or if you're a little south or a little north, but you're pretty much going to start in the center. And when you have a really large quilt on the Weightless quilter, then you're probably only going to have 1/3 of the quilt attached to the Weightless quilter. We're going to get into that in a little bit more. But those white dots on that slide and those arrows are indicating where the quilt is attached to the Weightless quilter. You don't have to have all 4 corners of your quilt attached to the Weightless quilter. You're going to work the quilt with the Weightless quilter, just like you would on a long arm, right? Like on a long arm, you don't have the entire quilt laid flat out. Same thing with a Weightless quilter. Okay, so that's our first hooping. And then you have a choice. You can move horizontally, or you can move vertically. I often go horizontally and do a row in the middle of the quilt, start in the center, go to the right. I know that our good friend Christine Connor at Emily Scott Designs, she likes to start in the center, and then she goes north and then south. Either way, doesn't matter. And then I come to the next hooping underneath the center of, my original first hooping. And I'll start there, and then I'll work to the far right. And that lower quadrant is complete. Now I'll work at the top. And really that hoop is probably not in the right position. It should be closer to the center of the quilt, and it would be engaged right near the top of the hoop. And story time with Cece, would you call our customer service department about your problem? 1-888-739-0555. We'll get you handled. Get you quilting again. Next thing you want to do is finish to the top right. You're going to move to the top right. Now, this may be multiple rows, right? This quilt that I'm showing you there isn't all that large, and that hoop is pretty big. I mean, you could have 5 rows on the top quadrant and five rows on the bottom quadrant, depending on the size of your quilt. Now, next thing you're going to do is you're going to flip that quilt, literally flip it around, so that now quadrant 3 and 4 are under the needle. And you will rotate your embroidery design 180 degrees. You do not mirror image it, you only rotate it. So you just flip that around just as you have done with the quilt. Again, you're going to start in the center and then carry on down to the bottom, and just as you did the first 2 quadrants. So as you advance the quilt, you're going to make sure that you make it easy on yourself, and you just lift that top frame of monster hoop over the head of the machine. Just rest it there while you advance the quilt. The metal bottom frame is still in place, and then you will drop down that metal top in position and begin to quilt again. Okay. Now, we're going to talk about handling the bulk, which my solution to that is absolutely the Weightless quilter. Why don't we take a look at it in action before we really dig down deep and talk about all its parts and how you would set it up and all of that. But I just want you to watch how the weightless quilter is actually swaying, right? You'll see it's moving just ever so little, but it moves the quilt as the sewing machine, the pantograph, is moving that hoop. And it just holds all of the excess weight above the bed of the machine, which is really key. You want it above the bed of the machine. Even if you have, if you let it drop off the back of the table, that's how you're going to get hoop drag, whether you're in a magnetic hoop or you're in a standard hoop. That's where the problem starts. So I just have 3 poles. I have 1 in the back, 2 in the back, and 1 in the front. This other corner is, because of the location where I'm quilting right now, is just kind of laying down right here. But there's not much body to the quilt here. There's only about 18 inches. So I'm not worried about that weight. I worry about the weight over there, and I worry about the weight back here. So as you watch this just sway, think of having 2 friends in your sewing room who are holding your quilt, right? They're actually standing there holding your quilt as you, advance the fabric and let the machine do its job. It is really cool. I want to see some of your comments. If there's any questions. Yeah. And Sharon, oh my gosh, and why don't I have one of those? I don't know, but you could get one. You could get one right now. It's still on special, and it is free shipping, $2.99 right now, and it's still on special. So it's really cool. It is really, really cool. Sue Brown, she loves it. It does make all the difference. You don't have to worry about the weight at all. So Veronica, the size of the quilt that I have there is 80 by 80. That's a big quilt, and that fits on my queen size bed at home, and I sleep under it an awful lot. I love it. I love that quilt. So pretty. Now, you can use any kind of batting. It doesn't, matter what kind of batting. We've tested the weightless quilter up, and it will hold up to 42 pounds. That's a lot of weight on a quilt. You probably don't want to make a quilt that weighs 42 pounds, I can tell you. But, and frankly, I don't know what that weighs, but it's, pretty much. And Elizabeth Culver, you've had it for a while and have never used it. You do have to get going. Absolutely. You do have to get going. And Retha, do I pin my quilt? I do pin base my quilts. That's how I like to do it. You can spray, but I pin base, and I do it on my dining room table, and I use pool noodles to do it. And I've shown that in other Facebook Lives. You can even go to Sewing with Nancy. I showed how to use pool noodles on Sewing with Nancy. And the reason why I can do it in my dining room table, I just need a table that the length is the same size as my quilt. I don't have to worry about the width. I don't have to worry about laying it all off, laying it all out flat. I just need that length, and I butt 2 pool noodles together, tape them together, and that's how I do it. So it is just awesome. And so what spray base does everybody use? So people pipe in, tell Cece what spray, temporary spray adhesive you like to use for quilting, for basting, because I don't use that. I just pin. So I'm going to leave it up to you experts for sure. All right, isn't that cool? See how it's just kind of doing its deal? I love it. I love it. It's awesome. Okay, so let's talk about what it looks like underneath, down on the floor. So it comes with 4 floor bars. You can see here there's 3 that are being used, and it comes with 4, and you'll see why in a little while. Some setups want more or require more. And then it has corner brackets that connect the floor bars. And it also has poles that extend up from the brackets, the corner brackets. And on top of those poles are fabric clamps. Now, it is positioned right under a table, whether a large table, sewing table, folding table, it just slides right underneath. And then you can use it for either sit down or quilting. Now we're going to show you a little video of what's in the bag when you purchase the Weightless quilter so you can get a better look at how it sets up. The Weightless quilter was designed to be flexible, easy to assemble, and every quilter's favorite partner in their sewing room. Let's take a look at the contents. You will find 4 corner brackets. The corner brackets will receive the floor bar in both this angle or these angles. These holes here accommodate the poles that extend from the floor above the machine to hold the quilt. You'll notice a smaller opening versus the larger opening. The smaller opening receives a flexible pole, much more flexible pole, and this one is a bit more rigid. You'll get to know your Weightless quilter, and it is very intuitive as to what pole to use when. You'll also find 4 fabric clamps, and these will attach to the other end of the flex pole. Of course, they also have 2 sizes so that they fit nice and snug. You'll also have these little finger cots that are in the bag, so you would slide them over the bracket so that when it's holding the fabric, it's just a soft, gentle touch next to your quilt sandwich. Let's put a sewing machine. This little red box will designate the sewing machine. And this is the area behind the machine. So I'm going to insert that floor bar into the horizontal opening of the corner bracket. And then I'll place my other bracket at the end, the opposite end of the floor bar. Of course, it's going to be a lot bigger. And then I position a floor bar to the left of the machine, coming towards where you will be sitting. And that will slide right into this opening. And you will also have a corner bracket on the end of this floor bar. You'll find adhesive, felt-backed adhesive in the box that you will apply to the end of the poles. And then once you do that, these poles just slip right into those openings. They're received very well. It's a nice snug hold. You don't have to worry about it popping out. And then you're going to position your fabric clamp on the other end. And that also sits nice and snug on there. So I'm going to pull this out so you can get a good look from the side angle as to how that fits. But, you know, now we just operate the clamp as such. And we'll do that over at the machine. Yeah, so that was pretty simple, right? To see all those parts. Now, let's see. KM wanted to know, does the Weightless quilter take up a lot of space? That you're on your dining room table and don't have much space. Well, I understand that for sure. So let's take a look at this is where I store it in my sewing room at home. I have a basket that sits in the corner. My poles are in there. My floor bars are in there. And there's my pool noodles. And in fact, I store some of my poles inside the pool noodle to keep them from curling. Because you know how they always want to kind of bend over time? They're, you know, fun things, right? So they just want to party all the time. So I stick one of my Weightless quilter poles in there, and that helps keep them a little bit more straight. So this is how you would set it up. On a big table, such as this, you would put, maybe on your dining room table, you would put the Weightless quilter underneath the table. Your machine's sitting on the top. What you want to remember is that the Weightless quilter should frame the machine, the hoop, not necessarily the table. It's all about the machine bed, you know, right where you're going to be embroidering. And in that image on the right, you can see there's my quilt, right? It's in the center of the table, and that's where the Weightless quilter is. It's not all spanned out the whole width of the table. Now, on a multi-needle machine, here is it in action. Now, we're using 4 corners because, you know, a multi-needle machine, right, has that big head that faces you as you embroider on it. So your quilt has to kind of sway in that opening. And so you'll need floor bars in the back and floor bars in the front. Now notice her floor bars, she has like an L on the right and an L on the left, and those floor bars are not attached in the middle. And they'll stay on the floor. They'll be just fine. It's just a way to get a more narrow footprint. If they were connected, it would be so wide, you would need more floor space, and you'd probably need a bigger quilt. So, you know, that's how that works. The weightless quilter seems a little foreign. And it's not a very elegant solution to a big job, but you know, quilting with your embroidery machine is a really big job. You don't need elegant, you need functional. And that's what the weightless quilter is. It really handles that job. And you know, it does have a small footprint because it's just those floor bars, they only measure 30 inches each. So 30, you know, to the right, 30 to the, you know, up and down. You know, so you don't need a really big space. Okay, if you are doing sit-down free motion, it's ideal for that also. Now, again, here we have two options depending on the size of your quilt. You could go with the option on the left where you have 3 floor bars, or if it's a bigger quilt, you would go with the 4 floor bars. Again, they're not connected by the machine. So, and you just lay them on the floor. Absolutely. Let's see. Any other questions? And Kirsten says she thinks it's pretty elegant. It's just watch it dancing. Well, that is true. That is true. Probably dances better than I do. Okay, so here we'll take a quick look at Joni Zaire Poole, who, well, we can't get that to play. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go back. What else can you do with a weightless quilter? You can do binding. That last job of finishing the quilt, the very last thing you have to do is put binding on. And truth be told, you know, lots of people have quilts that are quilted but have no binding because it's a big task. The quilt is at its heaviest. It has all that thread in it that you know, so gracefully added during the quilting process, but it's heavy. And you might be tired of it by then. You've already quilted it. I mean, you've already pieced it. Maybe you've appliqued it. Maybe you've embroidered it, then you quilted it. Now it's binding. So get it done quickly with the weightless quilter. I love this. And it allows you to do one long edge, and then you stand up and you rotate not the weightless quilter, but you rotate the quilt, reattach it, and then sew down the other edge, and then get up and do it again. And you know, it's good to get up when you're sewing and quilting because it's we should get up and move for sure. So Retha wants to know, if I'm using it for free motion quilting, do I start in the middle of the quilt? Well, I'm not a free motion quilt expert, but many free motion quilters encourage you to baste your quilt with straight running stitches, to stitch in the ditch, not every block, you know, but in some strategic areas so that you get a nice, good hold on the quilt. And if you do that, then doesn't matter where you start your free motion quilting. If you don't do that, if you're using spray adhesive, then yes, definitely start in the middle. Absolutely. Let's see. Yeah, and Veronica, so she says it's very easy to set up and take down after your sewing session. It is moves like tent poles in the wind. Absolutely. It is very flexible. I love it. It doesn't fight you. It does not fight you. If you feel it's fighting you, then your quilt is too taut, too tight from the hoop to the pole. So relax the quilt, you know, allow some of the quilt to relax and reposition that clamp so that it's not taut. So that it's just kind of, as you can see, mine, you know, it's just kind of a nice little sway to the quilt itself. And like I said, you don't have to clamp at the outer corners. So you can just, you know, play with it, move it. You'll keep an eye on it. You'll be like, oh, it looks like it's, you know, taut there. And then you'll get up and you'll change it. Cassandra Brown, thank you for joining me. And it is good to be back. Thank you so much. I missed everybody. I missed being here at work for sure. So let's see. Linda Brooks says, do you start in the middle? Yes, Linda, I kind of just covered all that. So after we end the broadcast, you can rewatch. And I did discuss how you divide your quilt into quadrants, and you do start in the middle and kind of work like that for sure. When would you use 2 vertical rods on the weightless quilter? I found it so in the same fabric clamp and in the same corner bracket. I think that's what she's talking about. And you would do that if you have an extremely heavy quilt. Then that's because the flex poles come in 2 sizes. You're going to get 8 poles. 4 are rather flexible. They're narrow, they're skinny. And the other 4 are a little bit more rigid. They still have some flex to them, but they're stronger and they stand up straighter. So you would use those heavy poles, like I am using those thicker poles on this quilt that I'm showing today on the back brackets of the weightless quilter. On the front, I have the narrow, short pole, and that's, flexing a lot more. But I needed to lift that quilt because it's long, it's big. So that's why. And frankly, Linda, I have never used 2 poles at one time in the clamp and the bracket. So I don't know why you would use it for sure. Do we have any sales on the magnetic hoops coming up? We do not this month, possibly later in the fall, Judy. Okay, so what is next? Oh, Small Town Charms. I'm sure you're all looking forward to that. So I thought before we got to the Small Town Charms, I'd like to show you the vintage clutch. That's last week. If you joined, Deborah Jones and Ashley Jones, they did a great job showing our vintage clutch. And they took us up to the part where you finished making the vintage clutch, and then you want to insert it into the frame. So I thought I would take that over and just kind of pick up from there, because that's really our special tomorrow. So here's the beautiful 3 clutches. These are all made in the hoop, and the purse clasp is sold separately. So I thought I would just show you. Last week, we showed you that you have the clasp, and then I like to use Fabric Fusion, Aileen's Fabric Fusion. And then I'm just going to drop a bead of glue all the way around this frame. And bear with me while we get it in there. You want to get that tip down into that channel. And you can see I'm moving pretty quickly. I don't want it to glob so much in there that when I insert my bag, it's going to all push out and ooze all over. So I have my prepared clutch. And you'll notice that I have a fabric clamp folding back this side because I'm going to work on inserting this frame. So I'm going to work on one side. Well, it's a little, so you want to get kind of the whole clutch on top, right? And we're going to work on this one side and then carefully push the edges. You'll also notice I top stitch that very edge because that gives you a flatter piece of fabric to insert into this frame. And then there you have it. It fits perfectly. I'm just going to let that rest for about 20 minutes. I'm not going to bore you and make you watch that dry. What I'm going to do next is I have one that I've already started. This one's in black. How fun is that on the red? Oh, I love it. So here's my, this is already glued in place. And then it's time to add the glue to the second side of the frame. And this is a little challenging. You don't want to get the glue on the clutch, but it might look from your angle that I'm doing that, but I'm not. I'm just right there in the channel. And I'm putting that glue all the way around. You got to make sure that, you kind of rotate that clasp so you can get the glue to drop down. Let gravity work for you. Don't do that. I just smush that all over, but it cleans up pretty nice. Okay, and then we're going to flatten that out. And I work on that one side and then flatten this one out. And again, you'll notice that I top stitch that edge. Boy, that's really the trick. Top stitching that edge is the trick to getting it in there. Now, if you're really fighting it and you're having trouble, get a pin, get a credit card. Well, then you'll get glue on your credit card, but that might be good. That might help you to stop spending, right? Okay. So now, and on that bottom, we're just going to let that sit in there, and we're going to let that dry, and then it'll be as operational as these. Isn't that awesome? Of course, we always have stuffing in ours. I love these little clutches. They're so pretty. What a lovely accent to an outfit. Really fun. So that's that. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so Anita, now you know how to do that, right? I was brave. I was afraid to do it. I mean, I have done it on camera before, but, you know, glue, fusibles, and live TV, not so much. But this isn't TV. This is Facebook. Okay, last week, my friends Deborah and Ashley introduced the Small Town Charm. So I thought we would show your Small Town Charms. Now, if you don't know about the Small Town Charms, this is a program that's been going on all year here at Dime, and you can still download any of these designs. They come in two sizes, 5x7 and 7x12. There's January, February, March, April, May, June, July, and August was a gazebo, and now we have, do I have it in here? I don't have it in here. Oh my gosh. But I have it right here. So sorry. Sam, bring me up. The book nook. Wasn't that cute? Oh, I had so much fun making that. All those books, you know. I thought about doing a school, but, you know, lots of schools, lots of kids aren't even in school. It's kind of a controversial issue, so I just did the book nook. Okay, so now let's take a look at your small town charms. Many of you, and I know that many of you participate in OML Embroidery Sew Along on Saturday following the reveal of the Small Town Charm. Now look what Candy Bray did. Wow, 2 stories. She skipped the awning and she added a rose window, a flower box on the 2nd story. She added a 2nd story. She did that all on her own. She's got 2 pooches guarding the front door, and she named it K9 Classics. Very well done, Candy. Just lovely. Really great. Okay, and then we have Marianne McCain Dottie. She added a lamppost outside of hers, and she has a little duskin, I think, in the foreground. Very, very nice, Marianne. Love the awning fabric, a tartan plaid. I wouldn't have thought of that. Looks really cool. And Marianne McCain Dottie, now this is her August gazebo. So she used really interesting fabric. She has some landscape fabric kind of in the far background that already has trees on the print. And then she put 2 trees. The 1 tree comes with the 7x12 gazebo. She added another one on the other side of the gazebo. Very, very well done. And here's Marianne Dieter. She wanted to share her, I think this was April, or maybe it was April, but isn't she did a beautiful job on that. She used variegated thread on a couple of her pots. Aren't they nice in the foreground? And she did pink awning on pink background fabric. Very well done. Really like that. And Renaud Paulson, she is back at it. I think her machine maybe has been in the shop, but she's at it now. Look at that fun awning. Isn't that nice? Bright, bright colors. I really like that. Beautiful. Well done. And Alicia Gentry, oh, she always goes overboard. She has her own name, which is On a Journey Books. I like that for sure, because books can take us into new places and definitely on journeys. Free coffee sign. She added a light there in the top right above the door. Notice her door, she skipped the complex fill and she added wood fabric for her door. Very well done. She also changed her background of the building into brick instead of the wood slats that I had in my sample. So she's really having an awful lot of fun with these small town charms. And she's got a book signing today. So who wouldn't want to stop by that bookstore, right? And Lynn Newton Broadbent, she went with hot pink for her accents and polka dot fabric. Really fun. Very well done. Luann McKinder Greenberg, 1 more page. How fun is that? I love that. And she's got pots that she added in the foreground. That 1974 address, I know, is the year she was married. I'm pretty sure. She always seems to add that into her small town charms. Awning fabric is great. Love that curvy stripe. Really, really beautiful. Very well done. And Cheryl Dunford, she's catching up from last year, and I just thought I would share what a nice job she did on her August charm from last year. So very, very nice. Next week, we have a guest, Reen Wilcoxon from Embroidery Garden, and I'm so excited to have her here. What will we talk about? Well, all things embroidery, that's for sure. So I'm really excited to welcome Reen here at 1 o'clock next week. I hope you'll join us. Next week and see what fun we have in store. And thank you all for watching today. It's always a pleasure to be here, and I'm so glad to be back. And I hope you all are well. So keep sewing and embroidering and quilting with your embroidery machine. We'll see you next week.